Hello, my name is Michael D'Alessandro. I'm the exhibits director of Northwind Art, and we're here tonight for the second of two artist talks we have for the exhibit If I Had Wings, which features 9 artists, and we are really happy to have 4 of them with us today. If you haven't seen our previous talk, it is on our website currently, and that featured artists Keeney Rathbun, Bethany Rowland, excuse me, I'm trying to get a handle on all the 9 artists here, and Stephen O'Donnell. So,
there he is.
and we have Chris Maynard here. We were having a little technical difficulties, so please bear with us. We're on this Zoom platform, and we have some technical issues always. I'm going to start by reading a land acknowledgement and doing some introductions, and then we'll launch with a video walkthrough of the exhibit itself, and then we'll open with some questions from the artists, questions and answers from the artists. And then at the end, we'd like to offer the opportunity for you in the viewing sphere here to ask questions of the artist. I will ask you just a few things ahead of time here to just keep yourselves muted while the artists are talking. It just helps with the noise with Zoom. And then as we go in, we're a small enough group, so you're welcome to turn on your video if you'd like. If not, we'll go into the Q&A after the artist talk. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today in Port Townsend on the ancestral homelands of the S'Klallam, Suquamish, Makah, Chimicum, and Twana Skokomish nations, as well as many other trading tribes. Native peoples have cared for these lands and continue to do so today. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude. The artist we have with us today, Martha Pfanschmidt, has been working as a professional artist since joining a printmaking studio in 1982. She has taught at university and privately for over 30 years. Her love of art and of creating beautiful objects has inspired her to explore a variety of media, but currently she works with paper and prints, encaustic painting, and kiln glass. Her work is in many private and public collections and has been shown all over the world. She is represented by Waterstone Gallery in Portland, Oregon, and Davidson Gallery in Seattle, Washington. Chris Maynard has worked with feathers since he was 12. His unique feather shadow boxes are recognized by art collectors, bird lovers, and a wide and interesting variety of people from around the world. He only has time to turn a small portion of his ideas, which fill many notebooks, into his shadow box feather designs. His favorite tools are the tiny eye surgery scissors, forceps, and magnifying glasses passed down through his family. Using birds as representatives of nature, Marie Hassett's work explores our relationship to the natural world. Birds are drawn and hand embroidered using thread-like miniature brushstrokes. Shading and hues are created using long and short stitches, overlapping and the combining of variety of colored silk and cotton thread. Kimono remnants and various paper and fabrics are collaged and stitched to for each piece. Margaret Woodcock thoroughly enjoys working in multiple media, as each has its challenges and creative results allows her to access different levels and senses of herself. Margaret makes work grounded in and greatly influenced by the imagery of the natural world and our attempts to catalog, measure, control, and find our place in this world. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to share a quick video, and we'll walk through the exhibit together. So bear with me while I do this quick share here, and hopefully it'll be quick and we'll see it all at once here. All right, thank you all. I will quickly close my screen here so that we don't play the video afterwards. I guess that did work. Excuse me, bear with me while I get this figured out. Thank you. Great. And now I've also prepared, before I open it up to Martha and the other artists, I prepared a slideshow. So I'll be showing that and sharing that while we talk. So why don't we go ahead and start, and then I'll open that share as we go. So Martha?
Okay, first of all, I want to thank Northwind for the opportunity to curate and prepare the show for the gallery, and all the artists who were great to work with. I appreciate all of you. Very professional and very responsive, and you do incredible work as well. And I also want to thank my co-curator, Keeney Rathbun, who I've worked with on many projects. He's always just so great to work with, and I hope we have many more collaborations in the future. How this show happened is Keeney and I have always had a fascination with birds. He has used birds in his work for years and years, and I use birds on and off in my work. I don't use them consistently, but I keep returning to them. And so we thought that a show of bird imagery, but not just pretty birds, birds that have some meaning to them, since for both of us, when we do bird imagery, it's using the bird metaphorically as a trope for something which is a human experience. And they're beautiful to look at. They're gestural. They have so many overlays of meaning just in and of themselves. And we thought it would be, we did the show a number of years ago, maybe 12 years, 15, many years ago, I don't remember when. And we decided to revisit this show with a different set of artists. And that's how this happened. As Michael said, I do 3 different media primarily. The prints in the show that I've done, well, they're not exactly prints, they're cut up prints. I am a printmaker, and the papers that my prints are made of, that my pieces are made of, are old prints that were failed in some way. So I saved the papers, as you can see. So those are all papers I printed, and then I collaged them down on a white piece of paper. How these started is last year, it's been about a year ago now, I was stuck at home like we all were, and I couldn't paint, I couldn't focus, I couldn't sit in one place long enough to do something like a painting. So I opened up my drawers of old prints, and I just started cutting them up and gluing them down on random pieces of paper I had. And I found it to be really therapeutic for me, because I didn't have to focus for too long. It was very physical. I could cut with the scissors and stick things down with glue, and it really engaged me in a different way than painting does. And I thought I would just do a few, and 130 of them later, I realized that this meant something more than just me wanting to play with paper and scissors. So I called them my COVID collages. The birds, for me, the collages themselves had meaning without the birds. They're all about the uncertainty we all felt last year, the difficulty of getting through this, of being alone, of being cloistered with other people all the time, all of those feelings of being trapped or being lost or being lonely or unhappy. I expressed it all in the collages. The birds were actually added after I made the collages, because I felt that they could somehow amplify the meaning. So for my pieces, the titles are very important. You know, you can look at this and see there's a bunch of cut paper and there's a bird, but the titles have deep meaning for me. So like thinking about Passage, for example, I was feeling trapped, like we all were, and I was thinking a lot about getting out of it, as we probably all were. So this arch in that piece, thinking about passage, was thinking about how we can get through to the other side. Michael, can you flip back to the two before that? Yeah. Never been here was what I felt about all of last year, like never experienced this before. And and this particular piece, I felt like the bird is kind of trapped in between those crazy shapes, and had never been there before, and perhaps would figure a way out, maybe not, who knows. Brave Little Soul is about how I would try to bolster myself up. Come on, you gotta be a brave little soul. Like just stand on top of this chaos, stand on top of these things that are toppling and falling over, and just tough it out. You can do it. Like those were the emotions I was feeling when I made these. So for me, the collages have meaning, and the birds just add a level of, I think, a way for people to identify a little more closely with what's happening in them. So the collages are made with papers that I printed myself, and they are on printmaking paper, glued onto printmaking paper. And that kind of sums that up. So that's me, and we can talk more later about other parts of my work if anyone's interested. But let's move on to Marie. Marie does the fiber work, the stitchery. So I'll let Marie talk about her work.
Okay. Well, why I do my work, why I work with birds. I was thinking about that, and I think it all started, I was living in Olympia, and one summer there was this crow that for some reason, I have no idea why, it was friendly. And I could go outside and put my arm up, and the crow would just land on my arm, and I would be gardening, and it would just hang with me. And I would give it, particularly like blueberries, I would give it blueberries, and it would take them to the bird bath, wash them and eat them. So it was just a mystery. And it was gone one day, I think in the fall, and I never saw it again. But during that time, I started sketching crows, and I did a lot of crow pieces. I had shows of just crow pieces, and I got obsessed with crows. And then I think that led me to be more interested in birds. And over time, I became a birder, and I enjoy that and do that. I'm no expert, but I know more than I did. And I started sketching and stitching all kinds of birds. I became very interested in endangered birds, extinct birds, and I've done lots of different series. For this show, I did do two pieces. You'll see this one of the ivory bill, who is extinct. There was always hope it was around. And I guess there were some questions here of this piece with a little feather. No, it's not an ivory bill feather, but it's a feather that I actually painted black and put in there. But I want to pay some tribute to these birds that are now gone, much due to human negligence and error and greed. And so I do a lot with endangered birds. And then the other thing I did with this show was shaman type birds, is what I call them. And I think as shamans, they've used birds over history to relay messages to humans. And birds have been that kind of messenger. And we see things in birds that are attributes maybe in humans. And if you look historically at all the folk tales and myths that go on with that are about birds, I mean, it's just in every culture. And so I started thinking about birds and what kind of human elements they mean for me as well as other people. And sometimes they've been very negative, like crows often are thought of as being evil. So I looked at, like in this case, the great blue heron, and I think about the patience that we can learn from a heron just in terms of how it feeds itself. And I have also done for this series, a golden eagle, which all eagles are somehow connected with strength and courage and power. So I kind of combined human and bird imagery, so to speak. And that's just kind of what I do. I do it all the time. And I don't know, it's just a part of who I am. And that's just kind of what I do. And I'm not even sure exactly why, but I feel some sort of, I feel kind of compelled to do this kind of work. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Margaret?
Okay. Oh, thank you. You know, I really appreciate you putting the images up, because for me, the pieces that I have in this particular show are all collage or prints that I'm creating, sometimes referencing a collage that I did or using that collage somehow, but making it into a print form. So I find, you know, why do I use birds? I don't think I've ever really answered that question to myself, but I find them fascinating just as creatures. And I also find it fascinating that we share the world with the birds, and they have their existence, what they do, we do what we do, and we don't necessarily know each other very well, but they're always around us. So I see them a little bit of as a mystery. And then most of my collages and prints, I usually have some human elements in there as well. So in this particular one, as the world turns, I'm looking at that figure that's in the window, doorway, whatever it might be, is contemplating. And I see the birds on the outside kind of doing a similar thing. So what's the relationship between the two? I can't really answer that. And I guess when I look at the collages that I do and the pieces that go into the collage, they're not exactly random, but in a way they are. And for me, it's kind of the mystery of the juxtaposition that I'm creating within the piece. And sometimes I'm not quite sure why I do that. Like that hand that's coming out of the wall, is it sort of touching that blue bird or not? But I see it, and it doesn't belong to the character inside. It's like another human doing something, you know, in this world. Meanwhile, the birds are just kind of hanging out, doing their thing. And I've created kind of the garden setting. So I think for me, the collages and ultimately the prints they're kind of a narrative. And I guess I look at them a little bit like they're sort of poetry, visual poetry for me in a way, as I'm putting these things together, but the meaning of them is left to whoever's looking there and trying to figure out how the pieces go together. I try to make it a somewhat logical world. Like this one right here, this is one of the first prints I did. And it's not built on a collage, but I create the prints like I'm doing a collage. And if you notice, like that last one we looked at, I do add things to the collage that create layers of imagery or pieces. And sometimes those things that I cover up are just as important as the things that seem most obvious, like the blue bird or the guy in the doorway. In this one, the finch is a bird that fascinates me, and why, I'm not sure. I love the color of them. They just kind of glow, you know, in when they're flying in for wherever they're flying in. And I see them, I guess, as a little bit like a private individual, and I'm much like that myself, I guess. I identify with it in that way. The elements within this piece right here, Rainy Day, that was a street that I used to live on, and I took a picture of it. And then what I do in these prints, the technique I use is I go into Photoshop and I collage the elements together that I want, and I get rid of parts that I want. And then I create, so like that that music at the bottom. There's actually a graph and some words underneath there. Those are pieces that I add as I develop it. And I can't really describe the print technique because it's a little bit complicated and it's just going to confuse people, but it's actually a print and it's hand done. I go to Corvidae Press and do my printing now with it, but it's a printed image. And the thing that I like about working with the print idea is I can change aspects of it, like the color, or I can change sometimes the underneath elements if I want to, if that feels right to me or not. But again, I guess I look, the way that I do the collaging and the way I do the prints is actually not unlike the way I paint also. And I think in the earlier artist talk, Bethany was talking about how she layers things very thinly, you know, with paint. I do that with the collage, and I also do that with painting. So it's that layering of things and that juxtaposition of why it's there, I guess. That's part of the mystery that keeps my interest, and it makes me wonder sometimes, you know, what it is and why I did it. The other image this one right here is a little bit more straightforward in a way, and you'll see that I've created like a landscape with the birds and the birds talking to each other. So I guess I see or use the birds as storytellers, as a character that can communicate with itself, but also with us, and how we do that. And I also think about, I guess, the fact that they can navigate places that we can't, but yet they inform us about those areas. And to me, it's fascinating how birds migrate and can make it back and forth. And we try to do similar things, you know, when we navigate across the ocean or whatever, but they seem to have it down pretty well. And we run into problems. I'm sure they do too, but I just find it's fascinating to me that they're intelligent, and it's a different kind of intelligence than ours. So this is a two-part piece, and sometimes I'll do that where I have like the birds talking to each other or whatever, and they're above us, you know, they're engaged in their world, and we're down there, whatever we're doing, you know, in our little world. So it's to me, those worlds coming together somehow, and how they work together. And the collage, I've loved it for a long time. It was one of those things that I came upon years and years ago. And I love collage. I love all kinds of collage, but I literally have collections of stuff in drawers that I can draw from. And so how I choose to put them together is more knowledge, I guess, of what I've got available and how I can put them. But I create it like a painting. I'll put something down. I usually have no idea where it's going to go, but it'll come together in terms of the coloring and the composition of it. That's real important to me too, what I put together in the composition. So I guess that's about it. But I just find birds as a fascinating character in the stories that I create.
All right, thank you, Margaret. And Chris, what would you like to say about your work? Chris, we can't hear you.
How is this?
That's good.
Well, I have a lot of reasons that I chose to use to do birds, and I use feathers. And the first one I usually tell people, the simplest one, and maybe the main one for me, is that I want to fly, but I can't. And I think I share that with most people and most cultures in the world. So we see these birds flying around and they seem swooping. And for me, I get this kinesthetic feeling in my body. I just want to do that. And so, if I share that with other people, I think that birds and also their feathers become symbols of our aspirations. And there's a lot of other reasons I use feathers and do birds. And one is that they're kind of these ancient dinosaurs that, unlike mice and snakes and stuff, which I could probably also get really into and portray, we can see the birds. They can fly and they can escape, so they can have these beautiful colors, and we see them, and there's a lot of different kinds. So that's another reason. And so, but I chose to use feathers in my art, and I developed a process of backing them, and mostly do birds because I think they have so much meaning for us that there's kind of endless things that I can communicate through my work. I liked Murray had one with the ivory-billed woodpecker in a little bottle. Do you have that one of mine? I have one called Losses. Yeah. So it reminded me of yours. And this one was actually in the works for many years because I was thinking about losses of the birds because there are so many less than there used to be. And so this was the feather on the right is carved and the ones on the left they're just colorful feathers that are in bottles. But I ended up doing it during COVID, which kind of gave it even more meaning for me. Yeah, great. And this piece here, I like to use feathers from birds that have naturally molted them or shed them because they do every year. And the feathers are incredible pieces of integuments, which is kind of like skin stuff, like scales. And they stay, they keep their integrity for many years. They're made out of keratin, and they're the strongest animal material that there is. And they're very complicated. And just today I was at a lake and I found some of these mallard feathers, and that's what these are. And I like to use the feathers from birds that I'm trying to portray or that have something to do with what I'm trying to portray. So these are a very small piece, and I also get inspired by the birds themselves. And these are some birds that you can hardly ever see. They're marsh wrens, and you hear them running around in the bushes and in the cattails, but you'd hardly ever see them. And the other thing I like about my work is that these birds may still be alive. So this duck, this mallard, might still be swimming around on some pond or something. So
That
I'm
it
good. Yeah, that's good
for now?
for now.
Okay, I do have some questions, and since Chris is talking about the feathers, I'll start with you. I read your book, Feathers, Form, and Function. What a wonderful book that is. You can get it at the gallery for anyone who's interested. And you have really thought a lot about feathers, and you know a lot about feathers. I was so amazed by the depth of information in that book. I have a whole new appreciation for feathers. And I just have a couple really simple questions after having read that book, although I could certainly get in a much deeper conversation with you given the right time. So my question is, which came first, the feathers or the interest in, like, did you see a feather and think I could carve that? Or did you think, I think I want to carve some feathers? I mean, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah. I came into this fairly late in life, and I knew I didn't want to just play around with a lot of different materials and wanted to focus on one thing. So I started out by just because feathers have a lot of meaning for us, I started just arranging them in different ways to try to communicate some idea, but I ran out of ideas fairly quickly. So at one point there was like a feather. I have the feather. There's a feather right here from an Argus pheasant. It's my favorite. It's my favorite bird for the patterns on their feathers. Well, there on one of the feathers there were little dots that weren't really little dots. They kind of looked like little birds that were trying to fly out of the feathers, which gave me the idea for making a piece. And that was my first piece of little tiny little birds that were kind of undefined, and then they transformed into birds flying out of the feather.
Okay, so the feather came first.
The feather came first, and then I developed the technique that I use out of that.
Okay, thank you. And Marie, a friend of mine who does fiber art commented that your work had a strong Japanese sensibility, not just the fabric, but the compositions, the muted tones. And she said even those little patches that you put on, like the cloaks, seemed to her very, very Japanese. Can you speak to that?
Well, I don't know why that is. I've always been aesthetically attracted to kind of Asian culture and look, and I have traveled to Japan, and I have accumulated a lot of kimono remnants. And I just think it's the aesthetic that kind of resonates with me. Other than that, it's not my culture, so I'm not sure, but I feel like in many ways too, obviously with fiber, Japanese culture has done some of the most beautiful works. And as far as embroidery, I feel like, when I went to Japan and I went to this textile arts center where they were working on kimonos and doing embroidery at such a fine level, I just felt like, well, I'm never doing it again. I mean, I just couldn't believe what they could do. And so it's just always been inspiring to me. But other than that, there really isn't anything that's directly related to it turning out that way. It just does.
Okay, thank you. Margaret, you actually answered my question in your talk, so I won't ask you another question. But Michael, maybe you have some questions.
Yes, hi. Yeah, Margaret, the printing technique that you're using to layer. Are you actually using map paper, or is that the paper you're printing on? Or are you getting that image from the Photoshop to kind of blend in?
I'll try to explain it.
Yeah.
I was trained as an etcher in printmaking. And so as an alternative to dealing with all the acids and stuff like that, I took a workshop a number of years ago where this woman used the photopolymer plates to create an image, hand print it or hand ink it up and everything, and then print it. So you could get an image, you print it like an etching, but it's actually, the plate has a photo emulsion on it. So you expose it and you can choose what you want to put onto the plate. So in that image of the bird, all the parts that are dark, the background with the tree, part of the music and the water, those are the things that are on the plate. So when I ink it up with black ink, if I just printed that, there wouldn't have been the bird there. There wouldn't have been the color of the water or anything. It just would have been a black and white image. So what I do, the second step, is that I create a color element, I call it, that I add to the image. So on that one, that's where I scanned an image of the bird. I colorized the water and all the brown, all that part gets printed out on this very thin Japanese paper. And so when I print the image, I ink up that plate that has the black on it. And then I have this color sheet that's made to size to fit that image. And I glue the back side of that. And so when I go to the printing press, I put the plate with the black ink on it and all the excess wiped off. I have the glued paper with glue side up laying on top of that plate. And then I put the print paper on top of all of it. So it's like a sandwich. And then I run it through the printing press. And so the ink is laying on top of the color sheet. The color sheet is glued onto the paper. So it's a chincolet technique.
Chick-fil-A, yeah, that's how you get those transparent colors and
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's really, yeah. And is that method is widely used in where was that invented, or do you know much about that Chick-fil-A?
Well, chincolet has been around a long time, and usually in printmaking, artists did it as a way of getting some color into
Right.
an image, and a lot of times it was just the background color and not so much divided color, or you could, I suppose, put different papers down. But the way that I'm doing it is I'm printing out so if I look at the color sheet that goes with the print, it's sometimes hard to tell what it actually is. But once I put the print image on top of it, then it kind of gels together
Yeah.
because of the way I did it. So it hasn't, the person that I took a class from was in the Bay Area at Cowla Institute, actually in Berkeley. And she had been doing some with, only hers were large landscape images and stuff like that. That's where I learned how to do the technique. Working with Photoshop was a whole new world. And I actually have come, I don't do photography per se, but I love Photoshop for its layers. And that relates to the way I do my work anyway. So when I create that image and I do the color part, I'm working with a lot of layers of stuff. And I can turn them off, turn them on, play around with it as much as I want until I'm ready with the image that I like. And then I go to the print shop, print it all out. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that helps me understand a little more of the process. And then I wanted to ask Martha a quick question. I see a lot of glass influence in your collages. The choice of putting them on the white paper, I was wondering if you were thinking like a kiln glass that's maybe clouded, just a white glass. Were you thinking of the color values? Is that the reason you put that on the white paper, or was your glass influence coming through?
I would say no. It wasn't. I was originally trained as a printmaker, so I have that basis. And printmakers work on white paper for the most part.
Right.
At least I do. And actually, though, it is true, Michael. Whenever I make glass, I always have a white piece at the bottom of everything because I think white makes the colors much more glowy.
Right.
So while I wouldn't say the glass influenced it, really the printmaking came before the glass. But as a printmaker, I just want to put everything on paper. And I have a lot of paper, so it was convenient to do that. And I really don't like colored papers. I like white paper. So that's why.
Excellent. Well, that's good to know. Well, I want to open it up to the audience unless Martha, you have any other questions, or any of the other artists have questions for each other. How about we ask, if that's okay, let's let everyone, you can unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question. We have a small group here, so just feel free to jump right in. Keeney, do you have a question? There we go.
I do.
Yeah.
Keeney.
Yes, one moment. We've got some reverb going here because David and I are both here. So anyway, well, first, actually, I just wanted to say hello to the other artists and thank them for participating in our exhibition, and also that I really admire the work that you submitted. I'm really pleased that you're all part of this exhibition. It was fun to, and actually I haven't seen the whole show yet. I saw the work, I haven't seen the show, but I'm coming up at the end of the month to pick up work. So I'll be there a couple days early and I'll get to see the work installed. So I really don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for participating.
Indeed.
Thank you, Keeney. And any other questions from anyone?
Well, if nobody else has a question, I can ask Chris another question, because people ask me this question, Chris, and I certainly can't answer it. Do you back the feathers with something to make them rigid so they're easier to cut, or do you spray them with a fixative, or do you just cut them as they are?
If I cut them as they are, they may hold together because they have little tiny hooks and barbs and stuff. But they would curl up. So I use different things. I went to chemical engineers and companies that make like 3M that make all these products, and figured out glues and papers, different kinds of papers and pressure that I back the feathers with.
Okay.
But what you see is the feather, which is my intent. I want to keep their featherness.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, well, that was my question and many people's questions. Anyone else have a question? Or any of the artists have a question for the other artists? None? Okay. All right. Well, Michael,
Yes.
I guess if nobody else wants to say anything, we can say goodbye and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you. And I will just plug our next exhibit, because a few artists here from this exhibit will be in a juried printmakers exhibit. It's called Printmakers Hand 5. I think Margaret, you're in that exhibit, and another artist from this show, Margaret Van Patten. Is anyone else? Am I missing anybody else from that is going to carry over? It was juried by Meritberg, and it will open in September and go through October, end of October, in the same space. So it'd be kind of a nice transition from the bird show, If I Had Wings, to this new print exhibit, and more artists. I believe there are 20 some odd 25 artists. I'm not sure. Margaret, you may know the exact number.
I think we have, I think it is something like 20, there's 53 pieces. I think 20, maybe 30 artists. I can't remember the number.
Yeah. And this, if you haven't seen the exhibit, If I Had Wings, come down. The space holds it really well, and it can hold a lot more artists. It's a nice space. So I'm biased, but yeah, please come down and see the exhibit. And thank you for coming to our artist talk. And we will sign off now. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.